Oh, hey! So, as you can tell from the shots and angles, this is a video about a computer. I built a computer. You actually caught me in the middle of editing this said video that you're watching. It's a little awkward, isn't it? So I can already hear you guys shouting, "Nerd!" from the other side of the screen, and I guess you're right, but I don't really care. I'm happy. So this has actually always been something I wanted to do since about middle school, and I've been really blessed with work right now, and I've reached a few milestones in my life, and I thought, why not celebrate? Let's build a PC. So for the past month, I've actually done a lot of research. What parts I need, if they're compatible, what fits where, will this fit inside of this case, will this piece go with this piece? And over that said month, I've ordered multiple pieces of a computer. So without further ado, let me show you what I did. So for the case, I chose the Corsair Crystal 280X. It's a micro ATX case, which is a fancy way of saying that it fits a certain smaller type of motherboard, which I'll go into soon. Anyways, first step for me was to take everything off, so I had the maximum area to work with. Alright, so I took the fan out from up top here, moved it down into this little slot right here. Right now I'm just going to kind of leave the case as is. Remove the front bezel, so you'll see this is all covered in glass in the future, but I'm gonna take it and move on to the motherboard next. I chose the Asus Prime Z690M Plus D4. What all those numbers and letters mean, I don't really know, but it's a micro ATX, which is a size, you guessed it, that fits in the micro ATX case. I didn't consider too much when choosing the board, but the main area of focus that I cared about was size and how new it was. My RAM I chose was the Crucial Ballistics 2x8 GB of RAM. So I'm sure you've all heard the word RAM before. It actually is an acronym, and it stands for Random Access Memory. So what's the use of RAM? Say I'm working on a project like building a PC. I'm gonna need tools for that project. So say I have this toolbox, and inside of it are multiple tools. Let's say just some screwdrivers, pair of pliers, zip ties, twist ties, just kind of general stuff. So the toolbox in this instance represents memory. So a hard drive disk, a solid state drive, anything that holds memory for long term. So let's say I'm working on this project and I realize my table can only fit 4 tools at a time. And when I want another tool, I have to take one of those tools, put it back in the toolbox, and pull the tool that I want back out. So the table in this instance is the RAM. So the RAM actually holds on the memory that usually takes a long time to get from a hard drive and holds onto it for a program to easily access. So as you can see, the more RAM/table space you have, the more tools and components you can hold at a time. But more RAM does not necessarily equal better performance. A lot of programs nowadays actually perform better with fewer tools. So just because you have more RAM does not necessarily mean you're going to get better performance. And to determine which tool you put back into the toolbox when you're getting another one out, that's a whole thing in computer science that I don't want to get back into. It's basically been agreed upon, but there's still many ways to go about it, and it's still a really interesting field to get into. So to put the RAM in, you just line it up in the slots and push until you hear an audible click. And make sure they're in the appropriate channels. Your motherboard manual should tell you. Alright, just installed the RAM on the motherboard. This is the motherboard, by the way. So this is the RAM. It made an audible click, which was super nice, but it doesn't look like it's super in there. If you can see, there's a little bit of gap, but I'm assuming that's just the design of it, so we'll see. The memory for my rig consists of 2 areas, an M.2 SSD and a 2TB hard drive disk. For my M.2 SSD, my motherboard comes with M.2 slots that you can plug this and other helpful components into. Just make sure that the M.2 slot you choose is SSD compatible. I didn't put mine in the correct one on the first try, and I had to disassemble my build to fix it. Your manual should tell you, and there's also writing on the motherboard to say if the slot you choose gets voltage for certain things like SSDs. So anyways, you put in the little stand and screw it down on the board. It's not as easy as I make it look. This is probably attempt 20 to get it secured. Alright, so I installed the SSD. Blows my mind that this is the size of SSDs now.
which I'm sure that's probably been like a thing for years, but I had no idea. But that's 512 gigabytes of data just screwed on to the board. Now it is onto the core processor.
12 cores, 3.6 gigahertz. The Intel i7 12700K is one of the newer processors on the market. Please handle this with care. It's a damageable component, and you really don't want to break one of these. So take it out of the box, align the triangle in the corner with the one on the motherboard, and it should just drop in. Close the pin down on it like your motherboard says, and you should be good to go.
Well, it's in there. It's kind of scary because that's like one of the more expensive parts. And it kind of just, I had to put so much force to push that down, like way more than I thought I would need. But holy cow, it's in there. That's so scary. Now one of my most worried part is the CPU cooler. So I gotta install that, and that's going to be so much fun.
The CPU gets incredibly hot, and for my cooler, I chose the Enermax Aquafusion. Please bear with me in my out of focus shots, but for this, you attach your bracket connectors to the cooling pump, and then affix the screw holder to the back of the motherboard.
Okay, CPU cooler braces are in, thermal paste is applied. Oh, please no.
Now that everything is set up, all that's left to do is to screw the cooler to the motherboard. Depending on how you want to do it, this step can wait until the motherboard is secured in the case as well.
Okay, CPU cooler is on the CPU. It's all kind of getting messy at this point. There's a lot. I should have put the fans on, the radiator, I forgot to do that. But you know, it's all right, I'll get it fixed up.
Next, I wanted to attach the fans to the radiator. You can attach them either way, either pulling air into the system or pushing it out. How I have my airflow set up is this. The front two fans are pulling cool air into the system while the top radiator pushes the warm air out. It's really a matter of preference.
Yeah, so I said this was my favorite part. I'm an idiot. Cables are supposed to go that way, or I'm trying to get them to go that way.
And as always, make sure you're screwing in the fans the way you want them.
Radiator has the fans installed, so that's cool. Motherboard has the CPU cooler. I need to plug in this pump. Goes into that one. But yeah, so I'm gonna, next step is putting it in the case. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 holes that I gotta fit this into. Oh boy. All right, here we go.
This was one of my least favorite parts of the build, mainly because I had the radiator making the insertion very difficult. So some cases come with these things called standoffs, which keep the motherboard from touching the case. These are what you actually screw the motherboard into. Some are pre-installed, others you have to do by hand. Once it's all in, screw in the radiator where you wish to place it. I wanted to put mine on the top.
Okay, so the motherboard, I actually kind of figured out you had to slide it into the grooves so that the back plate has them lined up. So as you can see, like on that guy right there, some of these come like they're standoff, so it's not touching the metal case, but some of them come with a thing in there, so that's in there. Others you have to screw in, like that one. Most of these came in pre-standoff, so it came with one. I don't know why they put all of them in except for one, but apparently they did. So I don't know, I'm debating right now if I want to take it all out and put it back in. I really don't want to. These are the tough decisions you have to make.
Going back to memory, installing the hard drive is actually really simple. You just click it into the holder that comes with the case and slide it back in.
Okay, lighting's a little tough, but this is the back of the case. I slid in the hard drive through here, so eventually we're gonna plug in some power and access to the motherboard through there. If you have any 2.5 SSDs that aren't M.2, super nerd talk, this is where they go, and then you can plug them in through here. I might do that in the future if I want more storage and if price is lower, but that's for a completely other day. As you can see, there's the bane of all my anger. So there's that. So now all that's left really is to plug in the power supply. I think I'm gonna do the power supply now, hook up the cables that I need, and then after that, hook up basically all the fans and all the cables, kind of get my cables figured out and managed, and then graphics card and a few other peripherals, and give it a shot. Sticking with Corsair, I went with their RM850X, 850 watts. Most builds don't need more than 750 watts, but I wanted to be on the safe side since every part of the computer experience depends on this piece. Make sure to check your manual and decide how many cables you'll need for the build. There are two I used for standard powering of the motherboard, and another two I used to power the GPU and other SATA devices. So this is the power supply unit. I'm currently reading the manual about how to hook all this up. A lot of it's kind of confusing, and I also don't know what it is, so I might watch a video about it. But yeah, I'm gonna get this hooked up and then plugged in and screwed into the case. All the cables should have words printed on them to tell you if they plug into the hardware or the power supply. Firmly press them until they click or the plastic hook is clasped into the hole. Now you just throw it into the case. Make sure the fan is facing outward towards the vent and screw it in place. Push your power cables through the hole to the front of the case and leave them there for later. I plugged in the SATA cables to give power to the hard drive, and in the future, RGB lights. All right, power supply is in, so that's pretty cool. Pushed all the cables through. Let's check it out. So I moved all the cables through here. Obviously, this is literally a nightmare for anybody who's ever built a PC. So I know this is. I'm gonna clean it up, but right now I'm just kind of getting everything set up. I'm gonna plug in the stuff for the hard drive, get that done, and then move on to kind of this cable management and getting things plugged in and set up. This part is a little boring and tedious. You just have to make sure you're plugging in the right cables into the right ports. The manual and the motherboard are both great resources in figuring out what to do, but even with those, this proved to be a stressful and confusing part of the build. The ports are pretty good at only fitting the cable that it needs, but that doesn't mean it's not hard to find the right spots. So cable management is all right. I have I don't really know the technical cables, I'm not gonna pretend. The 24 one, the 8 one is, I don't know if you could see it, try to zoom in, but it's kind of pinched against the fan, like it fits, but it's not secure. So I'm gonna have to make sure that's plugged in when I do more cable management in the future, but it's an update. Right now I'm plugging in my hard drive to the motherboard so that I can use those sweet 2 terabytes of data. Okay, she's looking a lot better. So I skipped through a lot of the stuff, spared you guys the time. So next up, second to last step, I believe, is I'm gonna hook up the GPU into this little slot right here, hook it up with this cord, and then hook up the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth into another one of these PCE slots. By the way, there's just a wire up here. I think that's basically, my motherboard comes with an 8-pin and a 4-pin connector. So I broke off the 8-pin and put in 4. I think that's fine. That's safe, right? That's not a live wire. Yeah, it'll be fine. But anyways, yeah. And then if space permits, I may add another fan right here. I don't know if it'll fit right here. But yeah, that's the plan right now. For my graphics card, I'm using the AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT. All right, time for what was probably the scariest part to me. The graphics card is probably the most expensive part of any build, and I really didn't want to damage it. Installation is actually really easy. Using a PCI slot, the top one for me, push down the release and slide the card in until it clicks. You'll have to screw it down to the back of the case to make sure it's secure, but once you do that, plug it in and it should be good to go. All right, graphics card is in. That took a little bit of maneuvering to do. I noticed you can take this little part off, and that made it a ton easier to get this in. It's a beauty in my mind. But yeah, so it's plugged in. I really hope that it all works. If it doesn't, I have to take this back out and do it all again. So we'll see. Okay, forgot to record it, but that's all right. I plugged in the Wi-Fi Bluetooth adapter over there. This is kind of the setup now. So all that's really left is to manage the cables and close out the panels. Here's what the final product looks like turned off. I'm just curious to see if it starts right away. Going. Oh, I wait, she's turned on and started again, so I'm kind of scared. Oh, Jesus, you're amazing. So that was it. That was my PC build. I hope you learned something from this. I know I certainly did. And there's so much to learn about the technology that we use every single day, and I hope that I was able to teach you something and you go away better for it. But to wrap this up, I hope that you guys have a good rest of your day. build a PC. Or don't. It's up to you. I'll see you in the next video.